On May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted in one of the most catastrophic natural disasters in U.S. history, unleashing a force equivalent to hundreds of atomic bombs. In just minutes, the symmetrical snow-capped peak that had stood for millennia was ripped apart, its top blown away in a violent lateral explosion that flattened 230 square miles of forest and sent ash circling the globe. What was once a towering, majestic mountain was reduced to a gaping crater, a haunting reminder of nature's raw power. These before and after images capture that shocking transformation, the day the mountain's face, and history itself, changed forever. He was a British Army captain riding with authority in 1924, but what no one knew then was that this man, Norval Sinclair Marley, would father a child who would shake the world with music, rebellion, and hope. From the rigid discipline of empire to the soulful cry of reggae, this photo captures the unlikely origin of Bob Marley's story. A tale born from two worlds colliding, where the son of a colonial officer would grow to become a voice for freedom, justice, and unity that still echoes across generations. She leans against the cold wall, eyes hollow with exhaustion, a baby cradled in her frail arms. This 1877 photo, known as The Crawlers, exposes the brutal reality of Victorian poverty in London, where survival often meant trading dignity for scraps. This widow, one of the city's forgotten poor, was paid with nothing more than a daily cup of tea and a slice of bread to care for another woman's child while its mother worked. Behind her weary face lies a truth history tried to bury, that progress was built on the suffering of those left to crawl through life's harshest shadows. In 1956, bringing a baby into the world in Indiana cost just $107.55, a total that covered nearly 5 days in the hospital, delivery room, nursery care, lab tests, x-rays, medications, and even a tiny bracelet for the newborn. This bill reveals a stark contrast to modern times, where the average cost of childbirth in the U.S. can climb into the tens of thousands of dollars, often with shorter stays. More than just numbers, it's a window into a different era of healthcare, where the price of life itself feels almost unimaginable by today's standards. In the late 1960s, Elizabeth Taylor's brother, Howard Taylor, wanted to build his dream home on Kauai's North Shore, but when the state blocked his permits to expand Hyannis State Park, he struck back in an unforgettable way. Howard bailed out 13 vagrants and told officials, "It's your land, and now they're your hippies." What began as an act of revenge turned into Taylor Camp, a wild, free-spirited commune where over 120 men, women, and children lived off-grid. It became a symbol of counterculture paradise until the state burned it all to the ground in 1977. In 1927, survival in rural homesteads often meant relying on desperate measures, and this haunting photograph captures one of the most extraordinary. When a mother couldn't breastfeed, or worse, died in childbirth, and no wet nurse was available, families sometimes turned to goats as nursemaids to keep starving infants alive. It was a shocking yet life-saving practice, a raw reminder of how fragile life once was and how ingenuity, however unconventional, often stood between death and survival. This picture isn't just strange, it's a glimpse into the brutal realities of rural life less than a century ago. He was just a stockbroker on his way to a ski holiday, but in 1938, Nicholas Winton made a choice that changed history. Instead of heading to Switzerland, he went to Czechoslovakia, where thousands of Jewish children faced almost certain death at the hands of the Nazis. With nothing but forged visas, determination, and a sense of moral duty, Winton organized a daring rescue operation, smuggling over 600 children to safety in Britain. At the time, few knew his name. Decades later, the world would discover that one ordinary man had quietly saved hundreds of lives from the Holocaust. In 1948, strange, massive footprints began appearing overnight along Florida's beaches. Three-toed tracks so enormous that locals became convinced a 15-foot-tall penguin was stalking the coastline. Panic spread, newspapers ran wild headlines, and hunters searched the sands for the mysterious beast. What no one knew was that it was all an elaborate prank. A man secretly strapped on 30-pound, three-toed lead shoes and stomped across the beaches under cover of night. He kept the hoax alive for nearly a decade, fooling scientists and terrifying communities before the truth finally surfaced, over 40 years later. Paris, 1995, two rising icons caught in a single frame. A young Leonardo DiCaprio, fresh off the success of What's Eating Gilbert Grape, shares a moment with Monica Bellucci, already captivating Europe with her elegance and allure. It was Paris Fashion Week, a stage where style, fame, and youth collided. Neither of them could have known how massive their legacies would become, yet this candid photo freezes them right before superstardom. Two faces on the brink of becoming timeless symbols of cinema and beauty. A fleeting second, now a piece of history. In 1990, during the Oka crisis in Quebec, a 14-year-old Mohawk girl named Wanique Horn-Miller carried her 4-year-old sister Kenyadio through the chaos as Canadian soldiers advanced on their community. In that terrifying moment, a soldier's bayonet pierced her chest, missing her heart by less than an inch. She almost lost her life defending her people's land, but instead, she turned that near death into defiance. Years later, Wanique became co-captain of Canada's Olympic women's water polo team, standing as living proof that resilience can turn tragedy into triumph. This photo captures the moment she was nearly silenced forever. In 1974, history witnessed one of its most surreal moments. Egypt issued a passport to a man who had been dead for over 3,000 years. That man was Pharaoh Ramesses II. His mummy needed to travel to France for preservation work, but French law required every arrival to carry proper identification. And so, officials granted the long-deceased king a passport listing his occupation as King Deceased. When he arrived in Paris, Ramesses II was greeted with full military honors, not as an artifact, but as royalty. This bizarre yet powerful gesture proved that even millennia later, kings still commanded respect. They say grief can build prisons, but for Sarah Winchester, it built a labyrinth. In the 1880s, after losing both her husband and child, the heiress to the Winchester rifle fortune became convinced she was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those killed by her family's weapons. To escape them, she began constructing a mansion in San Jose, a sprawling, endless maze with 161 rooms, staircases leading to nowhere, doors that opened into walls, and windows that overlooked nothing. Known as the Winchester Mystery House, it wasn't just a home. It was a monument to guilt, superstition, and the terror of being chased by ghosts you can never outrun. In the crumbling twilight of the Soviet Union, Moscow's streets became battlefields of ideology. This photo, taken around 1990, captures a moment of raw defiance. A decorated veteran of the Red Army, medals pinned to his chest, grips the Soviet flag with unyielding pride as he confronts an anti-communist protester. For him, that banner wasn't just cloth, it was blood, sacrifice, and victory carved into history. For the protester, it was a symbol of oppression and a past that had to be buried. Two men, face to face, embody the collision of worlds, one refusing to let go, the other demanding a future beyond the hammer and sickle. In 1923, Germany's economy collapsed so completely that money lost all meaning. This haunting photo shows children stacking bricks of banknotes like building blocks, not because they were rich, but because paper currency had become cheaper than toys. During the peak of hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic, prices could double in a matter of hours, and families carried wages home in wheelbarrows only to find them worthless by evening. What was once a symbol of security became nothing more than scrap, a chilling reminder of how fragile civilization's foundations can be when trust in money disappears overnight. On a quiet balcony in 1943, Amon Goth, the Austrian SS commandant of the Krakow-Plazow concentration camp, casually smoked a cigarette with a rifle slung over his shoulder, preparing to murder prisoners for sport. Known as the Butcher of Plazow, Goth terrorized inmates, often shooting them from this very balcony without warning. His chilling nonchalance in this photo captures the banality of evil, a man blending leisure with unimaginable cruelty. This haunting image reminds us how ordinary settings concealed extraordinary horrors during the Holocaust, where life and death often hung on the whim of a single man. In the final desperate days of 1945, the Third Reich conscripted boys and old men into the Volkssturm, a civilian militia meant to defend Germany against the unstoppable Soviet advance. In this photo, a teenage member of the Hitler Youth distributes grenades to men far past fighting age, some clutching outdated rifles, others holding crude anti-tank weapons. It is a haunting glimpse of a regime collapsing, throwing its last breath into a doomed defense. These were not seasoned soldiers, but civilians, forced into a war already lost, a chilling reminder of how fanaticism sacrificed even children and the elderly for a dying ideology. A haunting figure frozen in time. This Italian monk, dressed in full funeral attire in the late 19th or early 20th century, looks more like an apparition than a man. Cloaked head to toe in a hooded shroud with only small openings for his eyes. He carried sacred books and rosary beads as symbols of prayer and protection for the dead. These garments were not mere costume, but a ritual reminder of mortality, humility, and the eternal unknown. In an age where death was far more present, this chilling attire embodied the thin line between the living and the departed. Imagine being trapped in a city where even the air felt claustrophobic. This haunting photograph from Liverpool in 1907 shows a health officer measuring an alleyway so narrow, two people could barely pass. These cramped passages weren't curiosities. They were lifelines for thousands living in poverty, where disease spread like wildfire through brick and shadow. The image forces us to confront a forgotten reality. Entire families squeezed into spaces unfit for one, children growing up in darkness. It's not just a measurement of bricks. It's a chilling measurement of how society once valued human lives. 61 days without stopping. Can you even imagine? This haunting photo from the 1930s captures the winners of an Atlantic City dance marathon, a couple who moved their bodies for 1,473 hours straight. What looks like a celebration hides a darker truth. During the Great Depression, desperate people entered these contests not for glory, but for survival, clinging to the hope of prize money and free meals. Behind their tired smiles lie weeks of exhaustion, blistered feet, and minds pushed to the edge. This wasn't just a dance. It was a battle between endurance, dignity, and sheer desperation.